music.
Okay, good afternoon. It's good to see everybody. I'm honored to have a chance to ask a few questions to some of the hottest startups in the mobile space right now. Suhail from Mixpanel, one of the hottest analytics companies. And I think everybody knows about the amazing roughly 75 days of secret, and looking forward to more great things to come. Before we get into the specifics about instrumentation and analytics, that'd be just helpful for those of you that because I didn't know the full story about how these companies were founded. Have each of the founders just talk a little bit about what was the insight that got their company started. So, Hale, why don't you go first?
Yeah. So wait, we're talking about the story of how we got started?
Please.
Okay. So So the way Mixpanel got started was, it kind of started in a very simple way that most people are pretty familiar with. You work at a company, there's sort of a burning problem within that company, and you just wonder if anyone else is solving that particular problem. And so I did this at a company called Slide that Max Levchin, who started PayPal, founded. And really at Slide, they just sort of enlightened me to this brand new world of just doing just the most extraordinarily hardcore data analysis I'd ever seen. And so when I walked out of that company, I decided that when I saw all of Slide's competitors doing the same thing internally, I thought, well, if I built this, then maybe they'd use my product and then make some money.
Awesome. That was 4 years ago, right?
Yeah, that was 4 years ago.
Give us some sense of the metrics or team or progress so since then, customers.
Yeah, right now we track about 25 billion data points a month. So a data point in our world is every time someone, if you're using secrets, every time you're sort of tapping on one of the stories in secret to see all the comments, or maybe you're hearting something on Instagram or playing a video on YouTube. So we do about 25 billion of those every single month. We've got about 45 plus people in the company. We've raised about $12 million from Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia, et cetera.
Awesome. Chris?
Yeah, so I've been fascinated by creative ways that people connect. And I had built a startup about 5 or 6 years ago that went through Y Combinator, which is actually how I met Suhail a long time ago. And we built a lot of things and eventually went to Google. And there I worked on Google+. And that kind of drove me crazy. It was so complex, it wasn't really clear what you're supposed to do there. I think everybody here is probably on the same page about Google+. So when I left, I knew I wanted to work on something extremely simple that was novel and help people kind of connect. And I reconnected with David Bytow, my co-founder, and he worked with me on Google+. So we started by playing around with the concept of sending anonymous messages to your friends. And we weren't actually seeing enough engagement. And at the time, we hadn't implemented Mixpanel yet. But we saw that people weren't coming back enough. So we modified the idea a little bit. And the concept became more about broadcasting messages to your friends rather than targeting one person. And then since then, that was probably November, we launched a beta for about 2 months, which was really successful. And then we launched on January 30th to the public. So it's been about 75 days, as you said. And since then, we've raised about 10 million total from Initialized Capital, Kleiner Perkins, Google Ventures, among a host of other awesome people. And here we are now.
Can you, I think a lot of people are obviously fascinated with what you guys have built and the momentum, the virality to date. Can you talk a little bit about any of the metrics? What can you share from a metrics on, particularly the question I think a lot of people wonder about on retention, and how do people think about stickiness and loyalty on this?
Well, yeah, exactly. Stickiness is the first thing that we wanted to consider, right? Because you can just dump as many users into the top of the funnel as you want to at any point if you pull certain levers. But if the stickiness isn't there, if people aren't coming back and they're not sticking around, then you have a bigger problem. And you want to figure that out before you spend resources on getting people into your product. So fortunately, when we launched, we just had one article out, and then it kind of spread like wildfire on its own throughout the valley mostly. And we started to look at our users and see, after a week, how many of them are coming back. What are the indicators of them coming back? What are the actions that they take where they're more likely to be retained? So we saw that people that have friends obviously stick around. People that comment and participate in conversations come back quite frequently. So the numbers we published, which are still about the same, are about 1 week retention is about 75% for people that have more than 5 friends on the platform. And people that comment, the 7-day retention can be as high as 90%. And that rolls over to a month, roughly being about 70 to 80%.
How often can you make adjustments? I mean, just given that you have to push through the App Store.
Yeah.
How, I mean,
By the way, I just want to make a quick comment
Please.
that those numbers are very high, if I'd say, for a consumer startup, just FYI, from what we see at Mixpanel as we work with like thousands
Give
of
us a sense of context on this, Suhail. Like, what's
yeah,
the
like
median?
a good consumer company, like a social network, will produce maybe like a great world-class social network will produce like 80%. But most consumer apps, I mean, when we look at this, a lot of consumer apps, they're like around 12%, right? That means that only 12% of their customers or users are really coming back and using their products. And so it's like a really easy way to sort of determine, is what I'm building even remotely valuable for the world? Retention is like the most objective way of getting a sense for that. And so, yeah, so 75% is like great. That means you have like an actual really awesome future business.
So to that point, I guess the question is have you had the opportunity to make changes in the application that actually affect those coefficients?
Yeah.
Or is it fundamentally, look, because of the push cycles of App Store, you haven't yet?
The push cycles are a challenge because we're moving really quickly, and it's only been 2 of us up until about recently. We're up to 13. Going to be 13 employees at the end of the month. But just 2 people trying to move quickly and trying to instrument all the logging, which is like putting one line of code in. Sometimes we might later realize, we should have been logging this, and we're not. So then we got to wait until the next build, which could be a couple weeks, right? And then we got to wait for the data to start flowing in for long enough for it to be significant, right? You can look at it for a week and get a sense, but then what does it look like after a month?
So you're pushing on a every other week basis, roughly, or is that ish?
Ish, yeah. So all this stuff is client side, and there's probably more stuff we can do server side to be quicker.
One thing you should keep in mind is that if you're pushing for like into the App Store, right? I don't know what the latest numbers say, but if you look at Apple will actually publish the average time at which you can push in, like any business, even secrets, sort of limited to like 4 to 6 days in the approval process in general, unless you have like a awesome secret backdoor deal with Apple.
No comment. So to answer your other question, there's one thing that was interesting recently. We've been kind of revising the onboarding for our app. And so obviously it's really important that when someone opens your app for the first time, that they're going to stick around and actually commit. And I think we've been fortunate through word of mouth that when people do download the app, that they convert pretty highly and sign up.
Right.
One of the problems that we've been trying to address is how do we make that number even better? And I think right now it's about like 87% of people that download convert, and we want to get that as obviously high as close to 100%. So we remove the requirement for phone number when you sign up. So basically, we recommend it, but we don't require it. So after we launched that, it's been about maybe 7 or 8 days, and we saw that the 1-day retention on users that have no friends, so this is like we can talk about that too, because that's a big challenge, went up from about 18% to 30%, right? And that to me is a huge indicator. It's like, okay, so now if we get them into the product, that means that they're more likely to stick around. So maybe we should provide an experience where when you download the app, you can actually see a stream of secrets, and then maybe that will encourage them to sign up more, and so on and so forth. So we try and do as many things like that as possible. Yep. This one probably being the most interesting because we're just focused on user onboarding right now.
So Sal, could you just speak a little bit about best practices? I mean, you see a wide range of customers, and some of them, I'm sure one of the sometimes frustrating aspects of building underlying tools technologies, you see some people really just kick ass and use it to the best of their ability, and other people just mangle this beautiful instrumentation capability you've built without naming the ones that mangle it. Who uses it? What are the practices you see, the disciplines of people that use it well or not?
Yeah, well, you know the ones that are not doing well because the quality of those products, there's an amazing correlation between the quality of of a given product and in the ultimate adoption of that product. Like it's very, very clear to us when we go out and see a company that goes out and really thinks through the sort of the detail and the fine grainedness of whatever their products look like. And so Secret's a great example of that, right? Path's a great example of that. And so what we often see are companies that, a best practice is ship something that is of high quality so you at least have a fighting chance. The second thing is just having very clear messaging. So Chris kind of alluded to this in Secret, but we've seen other companies do it. Venmo does this thing too, where they kind of A/B tested sort of, if a user installs my app, what's the first thing that I show them to get them to understand what my product is? And so Chris was kind of alluding to the fact that, maybe as soon as you open up Secret, you're starting to see some secrets to get a sense of what it looks like so that you ultimately sign up. You'd be surprised that a lot of people just don't do a great job of that. A lot of people just, you sign up, you open up the app, and the first thing they make you do is like sign up, and you're like, I don't even know what I'm signing up for. Like I got shared this link in a text message, and now I'm downloading the app. And so, Venmo does this great thing where they sort of show you this like feed of people buying and transferring money to their friends, and they're sort of telling you exactly the items that they're buying with their friends. And so we're sort of seeing like a great trend like that on mobile because you don't have a lot of space on mobile to just position exactly what you do. So that's like one simple example just to get people onboarded, to even get them to the step that you'd be able to retain them.
Yeah, and then there's plenty of apps that have way too many steps, which is where like, funnel analysis is really useful to see when a user comes in, here's the 3 things they need to do to get to a good state, right? And you can kind of see the drop off at each step and how long they stay at each step. And that's been really helpful for us to understand people that are signing up and where they're running into errors or anything like that. And that helps us fix and make optimizations. Actually, we had an error where people that didn't have an American phone number couldn't sign up. And obviously, we didn't test that. So we saw this error coming through on Mixpanel, and there was obviously a big drop-off, which is we fixed that, and we removed the requirement for phone number, and we saw like that part of the funnel just pick up a lot.
So I guess interesting question. I mean, look, you started some years at Google, which is famously analytical in its approach to pretty much designing everything. Suhail, you run an analytics company. I guess the question is to what degree, when you think about these new consumer experiences, how much of it has to be intuition versus staring at the coefficients and the funnels?
Yeah.
And how do you think about the blend of sort of the science and art of designing?
I have an
services?
opinion.
Yeah, go ahead.
First.
We were just
expert.
joking about this when we came here. I was like, they're definitely going to ask me this question.
So I think that there's a difference between being data-driven and being data informed, right? And Secret is more data-informed. And that's because we like to leave room for intuition and gut to make the first kind of stab at something. And then we use the data to refine, optimize, and let us know whether what we're doing is working. But at a company like at Google+, we had all these dashboards, right? And they were just so focused on that number of like daily actives and like all the things that happen went into that, just that number. But I was like, what about engagement? How many people are actually coming and doing these other things? Like, is the whole product working? And that wasn't a question that they did a good job of answering. So I think it's really important to listen to your gut and not just like solely focus 100% on data, because you can end up going down the wrong path for your product.
Awesome. I'm going to take questions from the audience in a second, but Suhail, could I ask you to answer this?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's 2 ways. There's kind of like one simple way of looking at it, right? I think that like people, if you can be extraordinarily data-driven, and what may happen is that your business or your product will like get trapped in this sort of local maxima when there's like this great global maxima that you could probably attain. And so I think you can think of this like curve as like, it starts off with one big peak and there's like a huge peak, and then there's like maybe a different smaller peak below that. And so you may find this like great local maxima where you think you perfectly did it, but then someone will eventually find that global maxima. It'd probably be someone like Secret or Jelly or something that will just massively disrupt someone else's business. And so I think that it's a blend. And I think what you do with data is you have an idea in the world, and you go and pursue that idea, and you go try to pursue it either full force or gradually, right? You try to do this quick little test, and then what you do is you try to use data as a means of determining whether you were right or you were wrong. Like data can tell you whether you're right or wrong, and to what degree you were right or you were wrong. And I think that's the most important thing, is that you allow yourself to build an organization that allows for experimentation, that allows for creativity, that allows for testing. And certain organizations can allow for aggressive testing, where it might take a long time to produce that project, or very small amounts of it. But I think that data can help you. By doing those tests, you get out of that sort of local maxima. As long as you can do those experiments and run them pretty quickly, data can inform you, just the way Chris said, to find that great global maxima.
Any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
So in Secret, when you register, it says, I won't sell your email address for even $1 billion.
That's right. I wrote that.
So is that really true when your company is sold?
$1.1 billion.
I mean, it really comes down to a question of trust between you and this company that you know nothing about.
Right.
Well, how do you deal with that?
Well, specifically, just to be clear, like all the stuff that gets funneled into Mixpanel, we do not pass any kind of user data. We have an obfuscated ID that we use. In terms of user data in general, like we're very clear in our privacy policy. Now, granted, I wrote that when it was just two of us at 6 a.m. and we had no idea that this app would be anything interesting. At that point, like we'll cross that bridge. But yeah, so our user data is like very, very sensitive to us, right? So if we get, I think you're asking if we get acquired, like what would happen? Yeah, TBD.
Do you plan to go public?
As soon as possible.
Other questions? In the back there.
Thank you. My main question is for Mixpanel. There is some kind of a disconnect between Mixpanel and the third-party tracking systems. When a client comes to me and wants to track his post-install events, I'm just saying, take the number from Mixpanel, put it into has offers or ADX, and then let's try to fix. Is there any way you can maybe thinking of connecting the things so it will be one funnel from Mixpanel to the attribution of post-install events? Yeah,
no, I agree. It's terrible, it sucks, and it's really, really hard. So that's like the gist of it. But there's not a phenomenal solution today, and there's a number of reasons why. Both, I could go down the rabbit hole of exactly why, like technically, like it's extraordinarily difficult, and on other platforms it's actually quite easy. So this particular problem, which she's asking about, is like, how can we make mobile ad attribution significantly simpler than the way it works today is? And really what people mean to say is, how do we make mobile ad tracking really, really easy on iOS? Because on Android it's actually quite simple, but on iOS it's quite difficult because of the rules and regulations that sort of Apple's sort of under fire from because of the government. And so how can we build a simple platform that does the whole thing? Yes, you can, but you kind of have to be both in advertising. You have to be advertising agnostic, which means you have to be willing to play with all the other advertising players, and you have to be an analytics company. And that's a pretty difficult thing to do well, all at the same time. And so I think that's why there's sort of this like big disconnect, because companies, if you want to compete in that market, you want to try to be the best at all of those things. And so I might be able to be best at that thing, but then Chris may not be able to use Mixpanel because it's not very sophisticated or powerful. So yeah, I agree. I think it sucks, but there's both technical limitations, regulation, and product product focus that causes that problem to exist.
Please join me in saying thank you to Chris and Suhail for a great discussion. Thank you.
Thanks.